Hello and welcome back to another Django Admin Series tutorial. So here we're going to look specifically at model permissions. So before we go on, it's probably worth saying that there are many ways of creating permissions and applying permissions in Django. So this is really just a first look at model permissions via ModelAdmin methods. So specifically here, we're going to be looking at the ModelAdmin has add, has change, has delete, and has view. So we're just going to run through these and apply them within a project to show you how they work and then potentially how to extend them. If you are comfortable at creating a simple Django project, you can just start in this tutorial from part 2, where you can download the repository code, the zip file called part 2, load that up, and you can just start the tutorial from here. However, I will be starting from part 1, where I'll just go through the Django project setup for those who are new or not so familiar with Django. So first of all, I'll create a new project, and then we'll make a new custom admin area again, and then just create some users. We'll need to make a few models so that we can add some data to the models and delete it and show the permissions in action. So we need to do that too. So part 1 would do that, and then part 2 we'll move over to then actually applying permissions. So it's a little bit of an optional step for you if you need it. And then the last part of this tutorial, we will work through a basic extension of these permissions and extend to make decisions based upon the user. So for example, we can take the has delete permission and then deny access to everyone. And then we could specifically select users who maybe have got the delete permission, for example. Okay, so that's the tutorial. Let's start off on part 1. We're going to create a new project, make a custom admin area, and then create some new users. So let's get started. So I will apologize in advance, pretty much showing you these steps every single tutorial. Of course, I try and make this open and available to just about anyone with just about any type of level of Django knowledge. So we're going to start by building a new project. So we're going to need a new folder for this. So I'm going to put this on, I don't know, the desktop, for example. Let's create a new project. So I'm just going to call this Django Admin. So I've created a new project folder. Of course, now we're going to need a virtual machine. So I'm assuming you have Python installed on your machine. This is a Windows machine. So we're going to use the M switch, then create the new virtual environment folder called VEMV. So this is our virtual environment. And then of course, I just need to activate this scripts and then activate. So now it's activated. We can see it's activated right here, of course. So that's the first step. Now we can go ahead and pip install. So use the pip, the package manager in Python here to install Django. So let's go ahead and do that. So of course, next up is a new project. So let's go ahead and create a new project. So Django Admin, and then start project. And we're going to call this as per normal core. And then don't forget the space and the dot at the end there. So that will make the folder in this side of this folder here. So that's what we're going to need to start off with. Now we can use the manage function here to create or start an app. So let's just call this app again, just a blog. There we go. So of course, we're going to need a new model just to play with. So let's just go into core and settings. We just need to first obviously register our application here. So we just do it down here. So we called our app blog. There we go. So that's all now registered so that we can access the models. So inside a blog here, we're going to just create a new model. So I'm just going to paste this in. I've already pre-made this. So nothing major here. We're just going to need the title in this case, or just something so that we can apply some of these permissions to the model. So we're just going to have title in this model. Excuse me, we're going to need that import. So there we go. Nice and simple there. That's our model. So of course, now we just need to migrate. So py manage by make migrations. And then we're going to obviously just need to migrate. So that will make all the migrations. And now we can go ahead and create some new users. So I'm going to build 2 new users here. So create super user. So I'm going to create two new users, one called admin, password admin, and then I'm going to create another user called just user. Again, password is just user. There we go. So they're going to be, so I've got a super user of the system, and I'm going to have an admin user. So now I've got all that in place. We can now run the server. That should work okay. So let's go ahead and access the admin area. We're going to do that with the admin user first, and then we're going to go into the users, and I'm just going to go into this user because at the moment we've set this user as a super user. We don't want them to have super user status. We just want them to have staff kind of status, admin status. So there's a few different default permissions or user types here in Django. So we're just going to press save once we've done that. So that would just save that user. So now we have the admin or the super user and just the staff type of user, who might be a type of user who can just access the database and add some data, for example, but they may be restricted in other ways. Okay, so now we want to go ahead and build a custom admin area for this blog model, for example. So let's go ahead and go into our admin file here, and we're going to create this new class. I'm going to call this blog admin area. That makes it fairly clear what it is we're doing. We're just going to extend from admin and then admin site. Okay, so this is going to allow us to create a separate admin site. That's what we're trying to do. Create a separate admin site for this table, for example, or just a general admin area, separate admin area. So we're going to give it a site header. Excuse me. Site header. Yep. So we're just going to call that, let's just call that blog database or blog admin, however you want to do that. And then of course we could also add a lot of different things here. We could add a login template, for example. We could add a custom template for this, but in this tutorial, we're not going to do that. If you look at the previous tutorials in this series, you'll find out how to do that. So now we need to kind of register some of our models so we can make them available within this blog area. So let's first of all just go ahead and finish the setup for this custom admin area. So this is going to be blog admin area, and I'm going to give it a name equals and then blog admin. Okay, so now we can go ahead and kind of register our new model. Of course, we need to kind of bring our models in first. So from dot model, we'll just import all of them, shall we? Import models. Okay, so we're just going to import or make all the models available within this model file here. We've only got one model, and that's the post. So let's go ahead and register that so we can make it available within this admin area. So this is where we're going to say blog site. That's going to bring in this kind of, or connect it to this custom area here, because that's what we've defined here in this variable. So blog site, and then we're going to need to register our model. So similar to how we normally register our model now, we're just going to say model, models. And then inside of our models, so remember this is kind of the connection to our models. So now we're going to say inside of models, we've only got one model, and that was called post. So let's build that kind of connection to post. And there we go. So that should register our model. So now we can go ahead and let's go into our core URL. So we just need to set up a URL so we can access our new admin area. So I pre-created this for speed. So we've got the from blog. That's the app. Remember, we've registered that in our core so we can access it, blog.admin. So that kind of goes to this file here, and we're going to import blog site. So inside of admin here, we've got blog site, and we know that blog site, we've set up here. So blog site equals the blog admin area, the new blog admin area here that we've created. So that's nicely all connected up. So let's go ahead now and create a path for this. So we're just going to make a simple path here, to blog admin. That's all good. Now we've imported blog site, so blog site.url. So we've kind of connected that up to our admin page, and then we're good to go, hopefully. So let's go into our browser. Let's now remember the URL. Let's go into our URLs. So it should be blog/blog admin. So I'm just going to log out of here and then just go into the new URL, blog admin. There we go. So we've got this new area. So notice we've got this blog database name that corresponds to, if we go back into admin, the name that I've entered here in the site header. So this is our custom admin area now. So let's go in as the admin first. There we go. So now we have blog or post, sorry, is been registered. That's what we registered, the post. So we should be able to access the post database. Maybe just add some data. There we go. Okay, so that's the setup for this project. Any questions, any queries, any problems? If there's any changes I can make to make things a little bit better. If you think that this isn't needed at all, this kind of setup, please let me know in the comments. So let's move now across to part number 2. So let's get started by having a look at the add permission here. So if you need to, or if you have started here instead of gone through the setup code, like I said, there is the zip file here called part2 zip, and that's the project up to this point here, which you can just load up and start. So let's first of all have a look at utilizing some of these methods. So first of all then, let's go ahead and we're going to create a new class here. So let's build a new class. We're going to call this, let's call this test admin permissions. There we go. So what we're going to need to do here is just bring in the admin.modeladmin. Remember, we're using these methods from ModelAdmin. There we go. Okay, and then what we're going to do here is now we can start adding in our overrides. So let's just start by pass. We'll just say pass. And then what we need to do here, we can then apply whatever permissions we add here into these individual models here. So this, remember, we've registered our model post here. So what we can do here is kind of just bring in that class we've just made. So it's called test admin permission. I'm not too sure why my IntelliSense isn't working there and adding that. There we go. So I've added that in. So that just adds it into this registration of this post. So whatever we do here, we can start to kind of override some of these methods. So let's start off then. Let's just add some code here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start a new function here. And then we're going to use the has add permission. And then we're going to take in self and the request. Okay, and then basically we're going to return something. So we're going to return true or false. So basically what we're doing here is if we return true, then we must have permission to add. If we return false here, then we won't have permission to add. And remember, we're applying this directly here onto this post model. So let's just go ahead and have a look at what's happening here now. So let's go ahead and run the server, get this started. Code looks okay. Of course, there shouldn't be any changes here. I can just refresh this page and you can see that I can go ahead and remember what we're trying to do here is add permission add. So obviously I can go ahead and just add some more, right? So go back into here, go to add posts. I can add some posts. So it looks like it's working. Well, it was working before anyway. So let's go ahead and just change this to false. So the server's restarted. I need to just refresh this page. And you can now see if I go into blog and posts, well, I don't have that button that allows me to add any more posts. So you can see how directly that affects the model and permissions on the model. I've gone ahead here a little bit and just copy and pasted the model and just made migrations and migrated this model to add a new model. And I've gone into admin, you can see that I've just registered this. And of course, we're not bringing in this class with the override here. So obviously it's not going to apply it here to the books model. So when I go back in, you'll see that I do have access to the books and adding items. That's not a problem. But of course, I still don't have access to adding anything to posts. So 3 more to go. So let's start off a new function here. This is the has change permission. So again, we're going to bring in self and request. And then we'll start off by returning true. Give this a go. I've got a bit of a mistake there. Turn true. Okay, so that obviously won't make any changes. So let's go ahead and just add false. So we're going to add this again to we're adding it to the post. Obviously, we've already done that. So that's the post model. So we shouldn't be able to change. So let's just go to and have a look at this. Yeah, let's have a look at this first. So you can see that straight away I press refresh and the change that was here, the text now just goes to view. So all I can now do is just view what's here. Seems to be a little bit of a problem actually accessing the data. So there's an issue here. So there is a slight change with utilizing the has changed permission, and we can access what that is. This is where I nicely bring in the Django Admin documentation from ModelAdmin methods. So let's have a look at the has changed permission. Let's go down here. So you can see here that we require this additional parameter here, which is the object equals none. So we're going to need to add that in after the request. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now let's go back and have a look, see if we can access the data, and we can. So go ahead and read these different parameters. It does kind of give you an overview here, what and why object equal none is required for. Okay, so that is the parameters here for that. I just want to make this nice and simple as possible, starting from the ground up here. So yeah, there we go. So that has changed permission. So just to speed this up a bit, because you probably get the idea now, we're now going to have a look at delete permission. So again, let's just take in self and request. So we need to check the documentation, whether we're going to need the object equals none. So let's just have a look. There we go. So you can see here it does require. So let's go back in. Okay, so there we go. So let's go ahead and return false. Okay, and see if this applies directly. Looks good at the moment. So what we can do is close. Let's just double check. True. So change and delete. Okay. So you can see that here, when I do set to true, you can see the changes that were made here. I've got the option now of actually deleting the selected post, and I've got the delete button. And of course, as soon as I change that back to false and refresh the page, those permissions have changed and I don't have access to them. So the last method here I'm going to set up is the has view permissions. So we can go through the same process again. We'll just paste this in. There we go. So we just need to again double check the documentation, whether ob equals none. So let's just have a look. There we go. So we do need that. Okay, so we're going to change that to false. So we shouldn't now be able to view. So when we go back in and just go to the home to refresh this, you can see that, well, these things disappeared. So the actual model has been removed from the list here, and we don't actually have access to it. Of course, we could obviously do that by just not registering the model in the first place. But it might be that we might want to change it so that some users or types of users, only those types have access to it, and it will appear obviously for those who do have access. For those who don't, it won't appear, for example. So there we go. Now we have view. So you can see that they've got these four main permissions: has add, has change, has delete, and has view. So that's a simple case of utilizing them. So now we've got the basics in place here. for these different functions. Now let's just go ahead and look at extending some of these permissions to provide additional functionality. Okay, so let's just start off by returning ob none. Okay, so instead of returning true this time, we're going to return obj none. Notice there's an error there, so let's just return ob. Okay, so let's just go back and refresh, and you can see that I have delete status here, which is great. So let's just remove that and then refresh. You can see that I don't have access to it anymore. So what's that suggesting? What's that telling us? Well, potentially it's telling us that this obj here is or has some sort of reference to the user's permission, their ability to actually perform actions on the data. So it looks like by including object, obviously it returns true by default. If you read through the manual again, it's going to explain that by default it returns true. But let's just go ahead and because behind the scenes it's returning none, which is going to be by default true. So let's go ahead and see if we can just extend this slightly and use this further to perform some sort of action. So let's think about, for example, using this. So let's make a obj equals or is, sorry, none, or let's use obj.pk. So we can access, in this case, kind of the primary key of our post. And what we're going to do is we're going to say not equals. And then in this case, we're going to have a look at our post. So if I just look at it, you can see here it says post 33. So if you're not familiar with this, when a post gets inserted into a database, of course, it's provided an ID by default if you're using the default model setup here. So this is down here, you see 33. If I made a new post, that would be 34 and so on. So I'm going to prevent access to deleting post 33. So let me just make post 34 as well. So we've got 34 just to show this. And what we're doing here is basically we're saying not equals 33. So basically anything that doesn't equal 33, that's going to be set to true. And then 33 is going to be set to false. So let's go back and save that. So what's going to happen now by doing this, I refresh, and you can see that if I go into post 33, I don't have the delete option. But if I go in here, I do have the delete option. Okay, so that probably needs a little bit more explanation of what exactly is going on here, but I'm trying to kind of skip and prevent us to go down that path at this point. But you can clearly see that a small little technique there to kind of prevent deletion of a certain post based upon the ID. So you might be wondering now, well, can I use this to actually identify other items? So let's go for example, title. So the object title. So let's just go back here. So let's just get the title of this, which we know is that. Okay, so let's not equal again, or it's going to need to be in string. There we go. So not equal. So let's just see if this works. So we shouldn't now be able to delete this item here. So let's go back to refresh, go in there. You can see it doesn't or isn't available to delete and so on. So it looks as though we can access different parameters through obj in our posts. So it's probably unlikely that you want to perform these type of permissions based upon one item or one user. Typically, we want to group users into different groups, so then we can perform actions on those groups or set permissions on those groups. So I've gone back into the main admin area here. We're going to just now create a group. So let's just add a new group here. I'm just going to call this editors. And then I'm going to allow some permissions here, or just set up some permissions so that they can access the posts here, the post model. Okay, so we've defined some privileges there. So what we can do now is save that. And then we're just going to go back into the users and just apply that group over. So you can see that this user now has the permissions that are set in that group. I'm just going to remove these permissions that we set earlier and then save that. So you can see that all the permissions are going to be inherited from that group because the user is part of this editor's group. So let's just log out and then let's just go to our other admin area, if I can remember what it is. I can't remember what it is. Let's just go back into our URLs. Apologies. Blog admin. Come on. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now I'm just going to log back in as user. So no changes at the moment, except we don't have access now to the other model that we created. So let's now go back into the code and see if we can kind of filter out based upon the group. So let's just set this back, let's say to true, and there we go. So now let's drill down here and make some changes. So we're going to create a simple if statement. So if, and then let's just say the request dot user group dot filter. So you can see here we've the request has been made by the user. A user makes a request to delete, of course. So we then kind of drill down to that request and find the user and then their groups that are associated too. So then I'm going to run a filter. So name is going to equal, in this case, editors. That's what editors. That's the user group that we set up. And so if the group, I don't know, let's just make it simple. If it does exist. So if this group does exist, you would imagine we can now return, let's return true. Okay, so let's go ahead now and let's just return false here, for example. Okay, so what we've got now is we're returning false here at the end. So if the editors do exist, return true, else we return false. Okay, so let's go back here. Now this user we're logged in here is part of that group. So let's refresh. Let's go over to here and you can now see that I can delete, which is all good. So let's just go back here and change this to false, for example. So they are part of that group still, refresh, and you can now see I don't have access to delete. So let's just drill down a little bit further here. Let's just go ahead and let's just put in obj here. Remember ob returns true. So let's just see now if we can go in and let's just log out of the user here. Let's just go back to the normal admin area with admin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the group. I'm going to set the group so they can't delete. So I'm not going to give those privileges to begin with. So the group that the editor's group that the user is part of, I've just removed the delete permission from it. So they shouldn't have delete permission on it by default. So let's just save that. Let's just go back into the main area. So blog admin. And I'm just going to log out this user and log in as the user, not the admin. So I log in and you can see that hopefully by default, I don't have that permission now to delete, but I wonder if I turn this to true, it would then provide me that permission. There we go. So you can see how that potentially works there. Obviously, you need to start thinking about planning your permissions for your users and overriding them in certain occasions, etc. So users can be part, of course, of multiple groups, for example. So you may need to filter differently based upon that. Hopefully that was fairly useful information. You can see here that we can access all sorts of information. We can get the user name and so on and perform actions there. So just as a final example, let's go ahead and try and produce something that is kind of post-delete. So we want an action to happen before we actually then press the delete button. Maybe we want to make let's make a little kind of message. So I've already gone in and imported from the Django contrib the imported messages. So I go ahead and kind of make a message. So what I want to do is when the user clicks on delete an item, for example, any message will appear just to say, oh, are you sure you want to delete that, for example? Just kind of showcasing the fact that we can produce something kind of pre-deleting of an item. So yeah, let's go ahead now and just create a little if statement. So what I want to do here is when I'm pressing the delete key, we're sending kind of a post request. So we're going to kind of capture that post request, so to speak, and then inside of here is going to be an action. So basically, if we were to kind of perform an action, in this case, it's going to be the delete selected action. Okay, so essentially when we're going to press that delete button, we're going to create a post request. That's going to be essentially an action, a delete selected action. So basically we're saying once the system has kind of detected that, or once we've requested that request, we capture that, and now we can kind of perform an action. So let's go ahead and messages.add add a message. So this is going to appear just above, just below the just below the header. So message, and then we can take in the request and then messages.errors. I'm doing this in the dark, and I've got the microphone in front of me and I can't see the keyboard. And even though I've used the keyboard for a good 30 years, 25 years, I still can't touch type. Okay, so all these keyboard excuses. So here we go. So we've got this error here. We're going to set up. So now all we need to do is just define what the error is going to say. So I really hope you are sure about this. Okay, so we've created a simple kind of message here that's going to appear, an error message. In this case, although it's not an error, of course, but we're just going to simulate an error message here. So I'm going to press save. And so they do have permission to delete. So let's go ahead and have a look at this. Okay, so we're back in our admin here. I just refreshed. Let's go ahead and select delete. So here we're making a post request to delete this item, and that's going to be captured. And you can see here I've got lots of different messages here, multiple messages. So what's happening here essentially is that it looks like this is being checked multiple times for privileges, etc. So what we can do is if we were to kind of print out the object here, it would print out a number of times none, and then it probably print out one time. It would be the actual name of the post in this case. So what we're going to do here is say basically where object equals not equals none, then we're just going to print this out, and that's just going to happen once. It's kind of a workaround here, so it just prints out one, just to kind of tidy this up a little bit. So let's just try this out. Oh, got a bit of an error here. And okay, so let's go back, refresh, and we're going to try and delete it again. You can see we're just going to, one message is going to appear here. I really hope you're sure about this, and then of course we can go ahead and delete. There we go, successful deleted one post. Obviously that's still there. So just really a bad demonstration there of how you could also kind of produce or perform actions before you actually then delete the item. Okay, so key information here really is for you to start looking at these permissions, start thinking about potentially utilizing these permissions and how that potentially affects the user's permissions that we've assigned directly to the user. So we saw that there are two kind of levels here of permissions. We have user permissions, and we also have kind of direct model permissions via the ModelAdmin. So those are two kind of key areas potentially that we can utilize to help protect our data and manage the users and access to the data. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Hopefully that was useful, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.